Before dawn, the rural Alabama road is silent. The old buildings beside it look hollowed by time, their windows clouded, their doors still locked from decades ago. Men once lined up outside these rooms. They arrived early, some walking miles through fields, believing they were being helped by a government medical program. They believed they were receiving treatment for what the community called bad blood. What they were actually receiving was nothing. In 1932, Macon County was one of the poorest regions in the South. Black families survived through sharecropping, tied to debt that ensured they never moved far from the land. Medical care was almost non-existent, and segregation limited even the small amount available. Illness was common. Access to treatment was not. Syphilis spread quietly through communities across the country, but in the rural South, the fear was deeper. Treatment in the early 20th century was often dangerous, expensive, and far out of reach for most families. The disease lingered for years, shaping lives in ways people could not fully understand. Against this backdrop, the U.S. Public Health Service launched a study. The goal was not to treat syphilis, but to observe it. The men recruited were told they would receive care. They were given meals at clinics, transportation, and the promise of burial support, things that carried real value in the county. They trusted the program because it looked like help. They trusted it because no one told them otherwise. Government physicians traveled to the county and held examinations in churches, schools, and meeting halls. Men signed their names or marked an X if they could not write. Blood was drawn, notes were taken, symptoms were recorded carefully. Everything about the process looked official, orderly, and routine. But routine can hide things. Behind the paperwork and polite conversations was a single decision: the men would not be treated. Even when penicillin became the proven cure in the 1940s, the study continued unchanged. The researchers wanted to know how the disease progressed if left alone. They wanted to gather complete data. They wanted the men to remain untreated, even as the rest of the country was being cured in a matter of weeks. The men did not know this. They continued to trust. They continued to show up. They continued to believe they were receiving care, and the disease continued to move through their bodies slowly, quietly, and without interruption. Families noticed changes first: the fatigue, the aches, the memory lapses, the confusion. They shared these concerns during appointments, and the answers that returned were steady and reassuring. The program would watch over them, they were told. Nothing more. This was the beginning of a study that would last 40 years. As the study settled into the life of the county, it became part of the rhythm of the community. Clinic days were familiar. Families recognized the government cars rolling through the dirt roads. The nurse who worked with the study visited homes year after year, asking after the men, scheduling appointments, and earning trust simply by being present. Her visits made the program feel safe, even comforting. Inside federal offices, the tone was different. Reports described the men as subjects. Their symptoms were charted with precision. Their deteriorating health was logged as valuable data. Documents emphasized the importance of watching the disease run its full course. The goal of the project, as internal memos made clear, was observation, not treatment. The men continued to believe they were being helped. In the 1940s, penicillin changed everything about how syphilis was treated in the United States. It became the recommended cure almost overnight. Public health campaigns urged Americans to get tested and treated. Clinics across the country adopted penicillin immediately. But in Macon County, nothing changed. The researchers decided that introducing penicillin would disrupt the data they had spent years collecting. Instead of offering the cure, they doubled down on the study structure. They added procedures that looked like treatment, but were simply examinations. They presented spinal taps, painful and invasive, as special medicine, knowing the men trusted what they were told. The program's strength came from its routine. As long as the structure remained steady: appointments, meals, transportation, small incentives, the men continued to participate without questioning the purpose. Their trust became the study's most powerful tool. By the 1950s, many of the original participants were aging. Some felt the disease wearing on their bodies. Others experienced neurological symptoms that frightened their families. A few lost their ability to work. Each decline was noted, compared, and filed. Each death became an important part of the study's findings. Autopsies were encouraged, often with financial incentives, and families accepted because they believed it was standard medical practice. Across the nation, conversations about ethics in medical research were beginning to shift. New standards were proposed. Discussions about informed consent grew louder. But the study in Macon County continued undisturbed, operating as if sealed off from the debates taking shape in universities and government agencies. The harm was no longer hidden. It was present in bodies, in families, in the slow unraveling of lives. Yet the study remained untouched, supported not by a single decision, but by decades of small choices that reinforced its momentum. By 1960, the program had lasted 28 years. It had outlived several directors, political administrations, and scientific eras. It had become so entrenched in institutional memory that questioning it felt like questioning the foundation of the agency itself. The men kept showing up, the disease kept advancing, and the silence around the program stayed intact. In the late 1960s, a quiet shift began inside the federal agency overseeing the study. A few younger physicians, raised in a different scientific era, reviewed the files and felt an unease they could not easily explain. The records showed decades of examinations, decades of documented symptoms, decades of men returning again and again without receiving treatment. One epidemiologist lingered on the files longer than others. He studied the memos, the charts, the autopsy reports. He asked supervisors why penicillin had never been offered. The responses he received were vague, sometimes dismissive. He was told the project had scientific value. He was told it was important to finish what earlier researchers had started. He was told not to disrupt a study that had run so smoothly for so long. But the facts unsettled him. The study had become a closed world, protected by routine and buried in paperwork. The longer he read, the more the silence felt deliberate. He tried raising the issue internally. He wrote notes, asked for clarification, and questioned the ethics behind the continued non-treatment. His concerns circulated briefly before settling into the agency's usual patterns of delay. Nothing changed. Meanwhile, the men in Macon County carried on with their lives, unaware of the debates taking shape behind office doors. They went to church, worked the fields, raised families, and returned to clinic visits believing the government was monitoring their health. Some had lived with the disease for so long that its symptoms felt like part of aging. Others suffered complications that their families did not fully understand. The trust they placed in the study remained steady because nothing in their interactions suggested deception. Outside the agency, the country was moving forward. Civil rights marches unfolded across the South. Segregation laws were being challenged. Communities were demanding equality in workplaces, schools, and hospitals. Yet even as the national conversation evolved, the study continued unchanged, insulated from the pressures transforming the world around it. The epidemiologist who had questioned the program began speaking to a reporter he trusted. The reporter checked the facts, examined the documents, and followed the paper trail back through 4 decades of decisions. The more he uncovered, the clearer the pattern became. Men had been deliberately left untreated long after a cure existed, and the program had endured because no one in power had been willing to stop it. In 1972, the story was published. The reaction was immediate. Headlines described the study as a betrayal. Communities spoke of injustice. Lawmakers demanded explanations. For the men and families in Macon County, the shock was profound. For the first time, they saw the study described not as care, but as an experiment. They realized the trust they had built over 40 years had been used against them. Investigations began within days. Committees summoned officials, researchers, and staff members. Records were examined publicly for the first time. The hearings revealed how deeply the study had been woven into institutional practice. No single person had carried it alone. It had survived through shared assumptions, unchallenged procedures, and the belief that the men involved would never know the truth. The findings left no room for doubt. For 4 decades, hundreds of men had been observed as their disease advanced, even though a cure had been widely available. The silence that had protected the program for years finally broke. But the consequences of that silence remained. The investigators document blistering fevers, relentless coughing, and patients too weak to sit upright. Some men begin hallucinating as the infection spreads to their brains. Others slip into quiet delirium, no longer recognizing their wives, children, or even their own names. In each case file, symptoms escalate with a chilling predictability, and the researchers record everything with clinical detachment. Families plead for answers. Mothers wait on porches through the night. Children are told their fathers are simply resting, though they can hear the coughing from the next room. Rural pastors try to offer comfort, but even they admit privately to local officials that something is terribly wrong. The towns around the study site are small enough that every death ripples through the community. Word slowly spreads among local physicians that a cluster of aggressive cases seems unusual. Some suspect contaminated water. Others wonder whether an unknown strain is moving through the region. But the study team avoids giving clear explanations. They reassure the community that federal experts are monitoring everything, and this reassurance coming from Washington carries weight. Most people accept the silence. Inside the study headquarters, researchers debate whether the worsening symptoms compromise the integrity of their data. They acknowledge that the disease is accelerating, but instead of halting the project, they adjust protocols. They schedule more frequent examinations. They increase the detail of their notes. They track the decline of each participant with growing scientific fascination. Men in their 30s and 40s begin to lose the ability to walk steadily. Some develop ulcers so deep they cannot be covered by bandages. Infection spreads through bone. Respiratory collapse becomes common. Still, the official stance remains unchanged. No treatment under any circumstances. Community clinics push back. UNOS's report that the same men return again and again, asking whether there is anything at all that might ease the pain. But clinic staff have been instructed to defer decisions to the federal team. The instructions are firm, and nurses fear losing their positions if they intervene. As mortality rises, burial practices strain local families. Coffins become expensive. Funeral homes quietly question why so many cases share the same clinical pattern. A few local practitioners reach out to state health offices, but they receive polite, non-committal replies. No one suspects a federal study. The idea feels impossible. Meanwhile, newspapers begin to mention a mysterious rural illness, mostly in small columns buried deep in regional pages. The reports attract little attention outside the state. The community assumes it is simply an unfortunate outbreak. By the mid-century point, the researchers have amassed thousands of pages of observations. Some privately admit discomfort at what they are witnessing, but they rationalize it as a contribution to science, convinced that the long-term data will shape medical knowledge. They attend conferences, present anonymized findings, and receive praise for the scale of the project. None of the audiences know that the patients remain untreated. Local families begin to wonder whether the government presence in the area, long considered a sign of investment, might be linked to the tragedies unfolding around them. Whispers surface at church gatherings. A few surviving patients question why they were told they would receive special treatment, when in reality they only received examinations and encouragement to return every few months. But the study continues with full federal support, protected by secrecy, bureaucracy, and the belief that the outside world would never scrutinize such a remote program. And the people suffering inside it have no platform, no political power, and no way to challenge the authority that has taken control of their fate. The suffering grows, the records expand, and the study marches forward unchallenged.